Don't catch you slipping now. Don't catch you slipping now.
Welcome back to the hottest show in the galaxy. It's the Karen Hunter Show. It's Foolishness Friday. But I'm going to get serious for a second because, when I have an opportunity to talk to someone that can help us suss some things out, I'm excited. Yeah. I like talking to smart people. Mm-hmm. We don't get enough of these kind of conversations. Well, we do here on the Karen Hunter Show. I'm talking about we, the people. Not enough dialogue that's intelligent. I'm excited to have this woman on because I don't think that I'm doing things correctly. So I need some help. All right. And I'm always going to call in reinforcement. So she is a sociologist, right? By trade. She's got a PhD. She's a professor, Africana Studies, women, gender and sexuality studies as well at SUNY Stony Brook. Let me welcome to the show. She's the author of How to Be Less Stupid About Race, Crystal Fleming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Dr. Fleming.
Hello.
Hey.
What's up?
A lot of stuff's up.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
All right, so let's start with the climate in this country, right? For a while, it was all about race. Sitting here every day, watching, like, somebody just called the cops on a man babysitting. Somebody just called. I mean, it's just like it's some ridiculous. This 10-year-old just got the cops called on him because he brushed up against a white woman in a store. She called the cops on him. I'm like, this is getting not just the shooting, because it started with us getting shot, choked, beaten. Now it's just getting ridiculous, right? But now with this Brett Kavanaugh Me Too stuff, it's like race and this misogyny seems to be the same kind of ideology. It's the same kind of methodology. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, understanding the connections between racism and sexism and class oppression, all these axes of domination is really important. So in my book, How to Be Less Stupid About Race, there's a chapter called Listen to Black Women. And it talks about these intersections because you can't really understand racism unless you understand how power works generally. So you'll see some of the same mechanisms deployed. It's not exactly the same, but there are a lot of similarities in how racism and sexism and these other forms of domination work.
When I talk about power a lot on this show, but I'm never talking about it from the standpoint, when I think of power, I don't think of domination over anyone. I think of I think power is freedom.
Being empowered.
Right. When I talk about power, I want people to have freedom to make choices and to live their lives. I never think about it in the framework of like telling somebody what to do or having dominion over anybody but yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But when you say power, define that.
Well, power very simply is the ability to get what you want, right? So, and we can think about that at different levels of analysis. So what you're talking about is empowerment, which isn't necessarily about power over other people. But the reason why Black folks and other marginalized people have to focus so much on empowerment is because we live in a system where for generations, those folks who are in power have tried to dominate us.
And so
empowerment for us is also about naming the system that we're in, challenging it.
Yes.
And so, the way that I talk about it in the book is, a lot of people, a lot of racists in particular, as soon as you start to talk about issues of racism, they'll say you're playing the victim card. They'll say that, oh, you're just playing. But in fact, recognizing that you exist in a system of power is one of the first steps to claiming your power. The first thing you have to do, right, in order to do anything about racism is to understand how it works. And so if you're in denial about it, if you're like Kanye or other folks who will say, oh, either they'll blame Black people for our problems or they'll say there's no such thing as racial oppression, then that's actually not empowerment. That's empowering the majority population. So that's the framework that I'm coming from. I'm coming from a perspective that really asserts that power has multiple dimensions. When I talk about racism and I talk about domination, that's not to leave the impression that those of us who are targeted by it have no power. We have agency, and part of facing racism is to name it, and not just to talk about racism, but to talk about white supremacy. That's so much of what the book is about.
All right. We're talking with Crystal Fleming, How to Be Less Stupid About Race. So on racism, white supremacy, and the racial divide. I got a tweet from somebody because we were talking about mediocrity. Remember that? We were talking about mediocre white people.
Yes.
And so someone said, I'm one of the mediocre white people you were talking about. And I was offended.
They said that on the tweet.
Damn, they owned it. They owned it.
So he's like,
That's
and
the thing.
so I listened to you, Karen, and I really appreciate your show, but you really offended me. And I said, first of all, if you're mediocre, that's something you can fix. You don't have
Work
to
on it.
You don't. Yeah, that was exactly how I ended it.
You don't have to live there.
You don't have to live in mediocrity. So I'm glad that you're addressing it. But I think we live in a society where people don't want to work on it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So to tell them you operate in racism or white supremacy, to tell them you're mediocre and you can't compete, and that's why you like to have this dominant system because your mediocrity can reign.
Mm-hmm.
Means that they have to do something if they're acknowledging it.
Exactly.
And they don't want to do something.
Yeah.
So instead, they, push it back onto us. So I need to know how to talk because this person obviously wants to listen to the show. He enjoys it, but he was offended, and doesn't get how that was a problem for him to even acknowledge his mediocrity.
I just think it's amazing that they owned being mediocre. Like, that's rare for people to acknowledge. Yeah, you know what?
I think he was trying to be facetious.
I don't think he really knows what that means.
Right.
But this is the thing about white supremacy. White supremacy has been, for the last centuries, right, since its inception, a handout system for white folks to white folks, right? It's a system of entitlement such that it's not recognizing merit. It's not recognizing talent. It's not recognizing hard work. It's recognizing your ability to assimilate into whiteness and to claim power over people of color and black folks and indigenous people.
But they would say, no, my parents came here on Ellis Island and we came here with $1 in our pocket and we navigated
of course, that's the narrative,
right.
Pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps, right?
Mm-hmm.
Friend of mine, a mentor, Dr. Vilna Bashi-Treitler, she's a sociologist out at UC Santa Barbara. She wrote a fabulous book that explains all of this, right? The role of immigration in our system of racism. It's called The Ethnic Project. And I draw upon it a lot in my book. And what she explains is that white supremacy, right? It's not a static system. Generation after generation, we have waves of immigrants who come here, many of them for the promise of opportunity, right? But how do you get higher in the hierarchy in this country? The way you do that, if you're an immigrant, is to assimilate into white supremacy. It's to not rock that white supremacist boat. It's to either become white. And so we've seen waves of immigrants, whether we're talking about the Italians, the Irish, European Jews, others, who were not recognized as white as they are today. And then they assimilate into that system. And then if you can't be recognized as white, at least proximate to it. Like, that's the game.
Like Nikki Haley. You
like
change
Nikki
your name,
Haley,
you marry in, you change your dialect, you make sure you're not, you all of that.
What's the other guy? The other,
Bobby Jindal.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there are lots. Dinesh D'Souza, and
right.
I mean, we could talk about, So the folks who can't get recognized as white, though, like the Kanyes, like other folks who, nevertheless, I think I saw a statistic. It was something like 13% of African American men voted for Trump. All right. So, my book, How to Be Less Stupid About Race, is not just for white folks and racially ignorant white people, but it is definitely for them. But but all of us have been, all of us have been socialized in this racist system and are responsible for challenging it.
Here's the other. I feel like some days I'm in an echo chamber because if you are a racist white person, you may listen to this show to try to troll, I want to hear the other side, and I'm like, there are no two sides. You're either right or wrong in this thing, and if you're on the other side, you're wrong. Yeah, there's no two sides are equal here, but to reach the people that need to be reached, I started out the show 4 years ago trying to do that, right? Actually, sitting and crafting a show that could bring in those people. And we had a lot of guests, if you remember, a lot of Tim Wises, and Robin DiAngelo was on early, Jane Elliott, and I would have...
I love Jane, by the way. I mean,
she's our cousin.
Folks.
She's all our cousins.
She's the fam.
Absolutely. But I spent a lot with the monk. Remember, I had the monk from who was about healing whiteness, and so we would do a lot of this. And then I just, at some point, if I got to work this hard to convince somebody, so then I was like, this feels like wasted energy.
Yes.
Let me build the foundation from within, and they'll figure it out or they won't, but let's try to build something that is impenetrable so that no matter what they do, we'll be okay. Yeah. And so that shifted. I'm being very transparent right now. So I shifted my focus from trying to, let's all, can you figure this? Let's come on, people.
Because we can't kumbaya until we just deconstruct the system.
Till we buy ya.
Right.
There's no kumin. We ain't kumin until we buy ya. So we need to buy ya. Okay.
No, but you're so right. I mean, how much time are you going to invest in trying to convince someone of your humanity, right? That's not my job. So let me be clear. The book is actually not for everybody. The book is not for neo-Nazis, members of the Ku Klux Klan, white nationalists. I'm not trying to talk to those people. Like you, Karen, I'm trying to consolidate those folks and empower people who understand that the system is screwed up and has been set up to be that way. It's not malfunctioning. This is the way it was designed, right? So folks who, but even those people, there's a range of awareness. There's a range of knowledge about how did this come to be? What can we do about it, right? And different, stages of denial, right? Even once you recognize there's a problem, you might not really understand how deep that rabbit hole goes. So the goal of the book is really to reach, folks who, at least have a baseline understanding that Black people are human, Indigenous people matter, white supremacy is wrong, and then we can go deeper because that's like not a high bar. That's the base. And then from there, we can see, well, what can we do about it? What are the implications for how this shapes media, education, the way that we understand ourselves, internalized oppression, and all that?
We're talking with Crystal Fleming, Dr. Crystal Fleming, How to Be Less Stupid About Race. So let's go there. We did a series. We're continuing it with Larry Favors on education. I've given out homework to read Tom Burrell's Brainwashed so that we can just start to get a baseline of where we're dysfunctional and seeing the world. What are some things that people, once we get to we're human, we matter. What are some other steps that we need to take to get to a place where this race thing can be eradicated?
Well, I mean, okay, let's start there. What can we do so that the race thing can be eradicated? I think for me anyway, I'll just also be transparent. And the book is also about my learning experience. So I'm not writing this book from the mountaintop, of I've got it all figured out. But I'm going to take the reader on a journey, explain these were turning points in my own understanding of these matters, which, is ongoing. But, first, I really get my students and folks who, as soon as they start to talk about these issues, they're like, well, how can we end it, right? And I think the more you understand about how deep, again, this rabbit hole goes, when we talk about racism, we're talking about not just disparities in wealth, right, which is enormous. In 2016, when Obama was still president, white households in D.C. had 81 times the wealth of African-American households. And that gap is growing. Okay, so we're talking about everything from those 81 times. And that's not even the worst case. I think in L.A. it's worse. So we're talking about disparities in wealth, in education, in health, maternal, just the fact that Black women can't even have children without being in fear of losing our lives, right? We're talking also about epigenetics, right? I mean, recent scholarship has shown that oppression can even change your gene expression. So this is not something that's easily erased. And so once we start to understand how vast the problem is, now then folks get a little overwhelmed, okay, this has been centuries in the making. This is affecting every sphere of our society. What can we do? There's a lot that we can do, but first is to give up magical thinking, give up the pretense that we're going to end racism in our lifetime. I'm sorry, we're not going to do that. But can we, first of all, get really clear about what the term means, right? When we talk about race, especially when we talk about racism, people think, especially white folks, they think we're talking about feelings. We're talking about if I feel bad about you, if I'm prejudiced. That's not what racism is about. As y'all well know, racism is a system of power. It's a system of dominance in which resources are systematically channeled to people who are socially defined as white and deprived from people who are defined outside of that. And so if we're clear about what it is, we can combat the denial of racism. I talk a lot about gaslighting in the book, right?
What is that?
Well, gaslighting, it's a term that refers to, if you, especially it's a psychological tactic. If you've experienced any form of abuse, then you have experienced gaslighting. The abuser will tell you that what's happening is not happening.
I experience it on social media all the time.
Social media, you experience it on the job. And so gaslighting is about denying reality. And the social reality we live with is white supremacy. And so if you do any of this kind of work, you're going to have people who are saying it's not happening.
Yeah.
I don't see color.
Right.
What are you talking about? Why are you so angry?
Right.
And the more that, especially white people, because people of color and Black folks, we're not immune to racial stupidity, but we tend to have it better figured out because we experience discrimination, right? But white folks have a lot of work to do. People who want to think they're anti-racist. You asked earlier, what are we going to do about the others who, that's white folks' work. To gather their people up. And because they have family members and friends who have no family members or friends who are people of color and Black folks and have
75%. That's 3 and 4. The Washington Post poll, 2014,
and that in itself is, to me,
that's racist.
That's the crux of racism.
Yeah. Like
because that you can, I have to deal with you. You don't have to deal with me.
Exactly. And that it's very intentional. They have arranged their lives.
Right.
So that Black folks, people of color, are excluded from not just their intimate space, but quite literally from their resources. Right. So I think
when we show up in their neighborhoods, they want to call 911 because this is out of order.
Exactly. This is out of white supremacist order.
Right. How dare you barbecue in a park that I walk by?
How dare you breathe in my space?
Right.
Right.
Interesting. Okay. So chapter 2 is The Idiot's Guide to Critical Race Theory.
Yeah.
Break this down for us. We're talking with Crystal Fleming, How to Be Less Stupid About Race. What's The Idiot's Guide? Break it down.
Critical race theory has been really revelatory for me in my scholarship. So just very quickly, I did my PhD in sociology at Harvard University, and I specialized in the study of race basically from the start of my graduate work. And critical race theory was not part of my training. In fact, it was actually founded in part by a legal scholar named Derek Bell, who was at Harvard for many years. But those more like radical and I would just say realistic, perspectives on race were pretty much excluded from my training. So it wasn't until I finished graduate school, finished my dissertation, that I came across the work of critical race theorists, talk about the work of Charles Mills, who's now at the Grad Center here in New York. And it really helped me shift from being interested in race and disparities and cultural racism to structural issues. And again, to white supremacy, and really understanding that white supremacy is not just the KKK or white nationalists. It's that too. But it is mainly the social, political, and economic dominance of people socially defined as white. And understanding that and breaking it down in everyday language is what I do in that chapter of the book. Because the great thing about critical race theory is that, as I describe it in my book, it's like kryptonite for colorblindness. So I don't see race. So I'm going to show you, using critical race theory, how we all are socialized to see race, right? But unfortunately, critical race theory has been written mainly for academics. And some of the language and the terminology and jargon talk about this term called the epistemology of ignorance. Okay. Now, that basically means in everyday language, it's Charles Mills' concept, that because of white supremacy, we've all been sort of exposed to racial ignorance that misrepresents the society we live in. And so nonsense gets wrapped up as knowledge because white folks say so. Like what? I mean, even just the concept of race itself. The concept of race was invented by Europeans to oppress people. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so much to the point where it's been naturalized for generations.
And people will fight you.
Yeah.
If you take away their whiteness.
Oh, absolutely.
Ready to fight. I'm like, you're not white, you're Jewish. Ready to fight.
How
you're
dare
not white,
you?
You're Italian.
How dare you?
Ready to fight.
So
you're not white, you're Irish.
This myth, right, of whiteness as such a core identity. Students walk into my classroom, they don't even, I'm teaching race and ethnicity this semester, and I have my students, tell me about themselves, almost 200 students in the class. But one student wrote in their responses, they're like, I came into this class, I just thought race has always existed. And why would that be? Because there aren't courses that are required on the social construction of race. Mm-hmm. They're not courses that teach students this history.
Right.
Wow. Well, why it is? Well, when you don't educate people, then they can't be critical thinkers.
So 866-801-8255. I've got a couple of calls for you. We're talking with Crystal Fleming, How to Be Less Stupid About Race. I've been processing and thinking, fraternities are, please don't get mad at me, people, so I'm going to preface it. Greek fraternities and sororities are emulating white European fraternities and sororities. They're the brotherhoods and sisterhoods, but they're modeled after something that's not inherently African, number one. And we can argue that. Whether the Greeks stole it from the Africans or what have you, then why not just call them Africans? Why are y'all Greeks? The Masons. Black Masons aren't the same as the white Masons. You don't know all the things that you need to know about the Mason organization that they're never going to tell you. But we always want to emulate something that we see as powerful or what have you, instead of, is it possible, this is rhetorical, but please answer, for us to actually craft something that's not made in the image of whiteness?
Damn it. You know, I don't think you can even begin to address that without asking the question. So first of all, most people don't ask the question. Most people don't even understand that we exist in a system of power where whiteness is set up on a hierarchy, right? It's so normalized that people don't even give it thought. You know, you go back to the that doll test, right, where little black kids would prefer, the white doll to the black doll, right? Because of the society we live in.
50 years ago and today.
And today. It hasn't changed, right? So, I mean, first, the challenging that can't even happen unless you're questioning it. Now, I mean, we could go really deep into, sort of what are the possibilities of resistance within a system in which not even just our symbols and all that, but our language, right? We're speaking English. This is not the language
Native
of
tongue.
my ancestors from Africa. Right. So, yeah, I mean, the possibilities of resistance.
We have remixed it.
Yeah, we've right.
Stuff.
Yes, and we resist.
We do be saying things a little differently.
Yes, we do. And you'll notice that in my book.
Come on, 86682. She's Harvard educated. Let's go down
and
that path.
Miseducated.
And miseducated, right?
And you know about the miseducation of the Negro.
Carter G.
Woodson
went there to Harvard and was like, "This is some bull crap."
Exactly.
But I got your PhD though.
Yes,
I
exactly.
got I'll take your PhD, but I'm gonna tell you this is BS on the way
I'm
out.
in that tradition. Yes.
And we need to do that. So I'm saying let's master everything. But as we move forward in this, the discussion this is the math of it. Black folks spend how much, Dr. Fleming? A lot, right? We spend
1
to
3 $1.7 trillion a year.
Right. Somewhere in the range of 1 to 3 trillion. We power the economy with our dollars and our consumerism.
Yep.
What happens when those dollars are directed differently?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
So I just turned into Dick Gregory. Huh?
Yeah, you did that. You did that.
I know why he does it now, because I just felt something in my spirit, and you got to put a hook to it.
That's part of empowerment. That's part of how can I channel my resources to our community.
Let's start there.
I mean, this skirt I got on, I've been, I know y'all can't see it, but it's kind of fly.
I'm do Instagram.
A black woman made it.
Right.
I mean, like, we can do things in our own lives where we're like, and not just as individuals, but we can organize and say, well, we are going to support our own. Right, and that's part of resistance.
Take some calls, Dr. Fleming.
Yeah.
I like to call you doctor because you earned it from an institution and then you flipped it on them. Let's go to Patrick in ATL. You're on with Crystal Fleming. Welcome.
Hey, what's going on, y'all? This is your Twitter family, the active activists. What's going on, Karen, Cousin Seal, and Dr. Fleming?
Hello.
Okay, so you just said something that in the past few minutes that I really want to challenge, and I mean it's a healthy, fun challenge, but I just want to really get us thinking. And you actually just spoke on it again, talking about our economics. So that in relation to what you said about racism is not going to go anywhere in our lifetime. So true enough, racism, we may never be able to eradicate it out of all the hearts and minds of, the non-black people that live amongst us. But if we use our economics in a strategic way that can cause a certain amount of pain to those people, do you think that we could ever achieve a society where they might still hate us, have whatever animosity they have and bigotry towards us, but it's just too damn damaging for them to actively, outwardly express that bigotry?
Yeah, I mean, so I appreciate your question. That for me, if I would rephrase what you're asking, it's sort of, can we make racism too costly? right, for racists. And I do appreciate also your point, at least what I'm taking from it, that, there's only so much, and we were discussing this earlier, Karen, there's only so much energy you could put on changing hearts and minds. We got to talk about the structure. We got to talk about resources. And so for me, I think absolutely there's no point in trying to say we're going to change all the races. No, you're not. But can we shift resources? Yes. And that's the last chapter of my book. I spent a lot of time writing about that. What can we do? We can shift resources. We can organize. We can do consciousness raising, and my book is part of that, and the show is part of that. But yes, I think that there's a lot that we can do that doesn't require thinking that we can create a utopia or that we can change all the hearts and minds. Because when you come back to power, right, you realize all of any kind of collective struggle is about attaining, maintaining resources. It's not necessarily about changing everyone's mind, because how did we get the system of white supremacy in the first place? Is it because did all the indigenous people say, oh, yes, we think white people are, no. Did all, black folks, people say, oh, yes, we think white people are superior, therefore, no. It was established through blunt force. It was established through stealing of resources. I was teaching my students the other week. The state of Georgia literally gave away indigenous land through a lottery to white folks, okay, centuries ago. Okay, so this is about power. So I'm with you. I think you can definitely look at issues of economics, structure, and not spend too much time necessarily thinking that you're going to change everybody's mind, because you're not.
Okay, let's go to Tim. And is that Detroit? What is DT? Is that Detroit?
Detroit. Well, I have to call it in for a year. I cannot believe it. But listen, Doctor.
Let me just say something to you, Tim.
I
barely remember the people that come in this studio every day. You think I'm going to remember somebody that called the show?
No, I'm not saying you remember. No, this is the first time I've called. I'm saying I finally got through.
Then how you getting an attitude about me not knowing you're from Detroit?
No, I believe I'm not getting an attitude, but let me pose this question to the doctor.
Go ahead.
You talked about expropriating resources, but what about the culture that they take and make so much money off of? It seems like we're proud to give it to them. That can be monetized.
What can I ask? What do you mean by, can you give an example of being proud to give it to them?
Well, I live in Detroit. We got public radio and TV, and so much of what they talk about and collect money from is our culture, our music, our way of life, the way we do stuff. They just make so much money off of us. That's one part that we don't seem to focus on, but we have enough culture. I mean, so many people have profited from the creative culture that we have made in this American place.
Yes. I mean, culture is another arena of exploitation and white supremacy. So I think if I can take something from your point, it would be that as cultural creators, as Black folks, you have to be very mindful of, to the extent that you're able to, control over your resources, independence, right? And not just, allowing yourself to be exploited.
And thank God for technology now. We're no longer slaves to somebody's record label or television outlet to produce content. There are content creators propping up every day on YouTube and other places, and they're making not just a living, a difference.
Yeah, right, and that's why, it's problematic too, for sure. But social media, that's what I love about it. I love that I'm not on somebody's schedule. I'm not, beholden to some, company, of course, but I don't own Twitter. But I own my ability to express. You don't have to be famous these days to reach a lot of people.
That's true.
We all can reach each other. So, yes, I think there are a lot of opportunities there.
Let me tell you about your memory, just in case you couldn't remember stuff, because I have trouble. Don't get involved in this, Dr. Fleming. It's called Cognium. Natral Cognium, and improves memory and concentration. Cognium is a brain health supplement with an ingredient proven effective in human clinical trials, and it works really simply. It improves energy and blood flow to your brain. We need to all think better. So stay sharp, stay you with Natral Cognium, and you can learn more at cogniummind.com. That's COGNIUM mind.com. All right, let's take one more call before we go to break. This is tough because I don't know who's a good caller. All right. It's tough. I don't know. Okay. All right. All right. Larry in Michigan. Uh-oh. Hey, Larry.
Hi. Well, hi. I was listening. I just had and then I'm going to jump off. But earlier the doctor had mentioned had ran a list, and then she said internalized oppression and those things. And for years, I looked into that, and it seems like internalized oppression, as far as like something you said, can we all do something together? As far as blacks coming together. But it seems to me that we have a problem with validating each other.
So let me just pause you. Let me pause you. Can I just pause you, Larry? Are you new to the show? Hello?
No, well, I listen to you all the time.
Okay, so one of the things that I'm really big on right now is speaking things into creation, right? So we don't do crabs in a barrel. We don't talk about how we don't support each other, because the reality is this show's an example of support.
Right.
All up and down, up and down the channel is nothing but support. These listeners, I'm sitting here reading 50 billion commercials because you support. So I can't follow your line of questioning because it doesn't exist in this space. And what we have to challenge ourselves to do is watch our mouths, watch what we put out, and then let's be the change we want to see. If you're not seeing support in your life, show it, because this is the model right here.
Show it and also see what you can do to find that support. Like I had to do that when I started getting interested in critical race theory. That's not how I was trained, so I needed new mentors. And this is years ago, and I was still junior. I was like, all right, if I'm going to stay in this profession, I need support. How's that going to happen? And let me tell you, when I started searching for it, it came into existence. It took time, it took work. Like anything, you grow something, it takes effort. But I get this question all the time, like, do you get pushback for your work, or what about? And of course, anyone who does this work, you're going to get it. But I'm sorry, I have to be honest. I get so much more support.
Right.
I get so much. And especially, I have to say, from Black women. And all over the world, because my research is also about race in France. And it's Black French women who support that work so much. And Black women in the United States, who support my work. So, and other folks too. I recognize that, all of y'all. But yeah, I get so much support. And so I have to recognize that. We have to
be the change.
And I try to give it. I try to give it.
It starts with you. So back. Larry, be more supportive. and again, let's watch how we talk to one another and about one another, because that's part of the trick of the oppressor too, is to get us to have these negative feelings about each other and ourselves, and it becomes generational, right? So this is good work. How to be less stupid about race. Can you come back in and we could just talk about all kinds, because you're sociology, man. That's a powerful. No, it's a powerful field that we gotta really dig into.
And I just have to say, I have so much admiration for your work and your show. No, really, like when I found out that y'all reached out, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. So yes, let's keep the conversation going.
Gonna have you back. Dr. Fleming, check her out. Wait, before you applaud. Always the Self.
On Twitter.
What does that mean? Always
that's going to be the next conversation when I come back.
All right. Yeah. You're going to break down Always the Self. You follow her at Always the Self, crystalfleming.com. How to be less stupid about race. We've tweeted that out, so people will go get it. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.